following up on yesterday's video about the end of the shutdown, where I presented 3 different possibilities, and as it turned out, the one that I thought was least likely became the one that actually took place. However, it has given me some insight into what might be happening here. And so the correlation there is that we're on the Jupiter station in Cancer, and it seems as though the driving force behind the few Democrats that decided to ally themselves with the Republicans in order to open the government is connected to, in largest measure, to the restoration of SNAP benefits, which of course is the basic idea of feeding people food, which is what cancer rules. There are more things. There are all kinds of federal jobs that were on hold, and so those people weren't being paid. So a number of things will be restored, not to mention that they did extract some concessions that now protect in future if there are further shutdowns, which there could very easily be. And one of the reasons for that is that you may remember that I think I mentioned Mercury retrograde being part of this. It's just now entering its retrograde cycle for the next 3 or so weeks. And the typical thing that happens when something is done or purchased or that kind of thing with Mercury retrograde is that you then need to redo it in some way. It doesn't quite turn out as expected. I mean, there are exceptions, but the bigger the theme, the more you're counseled to be careful, and especially when it comes to this entire crew of people on both sides, really, but especially on the Republican side, where there is constant and repeated bad faith. And so you get scenarios where you think it's solved and then you have to revisit it, and they even set it up in this way. By the way they do business, they'll do short-term things because they can't agree on any kind of long-term solution. And we're seeing, of course, as always happens, quite a few people are very upset because they feel that the Democrats had leverage. They should have stuck to their plan to extract more from the Republicans, but it's also true that the Republicans weren't budging. They're still following their orange master, who, in my opinion, is leading them into a suicide mission, but that's a separate topic. I'll cover that a little bit, but not as much in this video. The key thing here is the shutdown effects. And there, I think we can be a little more optimistic than some who are saying that this effectively will doom the Affordable Care Act because, yes, they said, we agreed to a vote in December, 40 days from the government opening, and immediately back to the bad faith statement. You wonder if it's just not another bait and switch that these guys meaning the GOP, constantly engage in. But on the other hand, and this is very important, you wonder how, given what happened last Tuesday, the beating they took was quite significant. In fact, when you hear sloppy Steve Bannon saying that in one election night, Democrats undid the MAGA work of the last 10 years, you know that it was a serious message. And they know that more is coming. And it just seems really obvious to me that if they do nothing at all about the ACA premiums and just let it sit there with millions of people forced to pay a lot more for their health care, I would think that it's a very bad topic as we go into the 2026 election cycle. And if you think about the dynamics of these negotiations, you could almost expect that they were never going to agree to the democratic terms, because that would be a major loss of face. You carry this thing through weeks and weeks and then you agree. That would have looked terrible. However, now, if they paint it as their idea in some way, then it'll seem a lot better. It'll seem like they're controlling the situation in some way, not to mention that many of those people are their own voters, because when you say you're going to extend the credits so that premiums aren't as expensive, many of those people are Trump supporters, and you will demoralize them at minimum going into the 2026 election, meaning they may not vote, even if they don't vote Democratic, though we're seeing that some of them are, because otherwise how do you explain places like Missouri and Georgia, where there were some unexpectedly bad results for the Republicans. And astrologically, the reason is that what we're traveling through in November as we speak and as we go into mid-December is the last period of Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. Jupiter is in Cancer, which is another water sign, so there you get a trine. And Jupiter does definitely contribute to the benevolence and the possibility of a good outcome. That affects everyone. And the reason I say this is that we're, for example, in the Cancer zone where Jupiter is, and being in the station as it is as we speak, particularly over the weekend, it's really strong, the effect. So then the likelihood of something reflected in food-related matters increases. Also, you get other things like real estate and home matters and so forth. But in this case, to me, the key area was food. Pisces, however, relates to drugs and medicine and such things as the Affordable Care Act, as a safety net, as something that is done for the people in order to protect their health. And that's where Saturn is. Trying to Jupiter, that has a strong suggestion of something positive happening, especially because it connects to a majorly important planet in the American chart, namely the Mercury in Cancer, in the 8th sign. You get a trine, that Mercury rules government, and so all of it comes together to suggest to me that there is some possibility at minimum of something being done, rather than the classic we tricked you and now you get nothing. And if not, if they just decide, well, no, we're not going to do anything because we're hell-bent on just funneling money to rich people and taking it away from poor people, or even people that are middle class and in many cases desperately need it, or in other cases it really hurts their interest. Well, in that case, then I would look at this period as potentially what will decide the next election, even more than if they were to change something, in other words, improve something, in which case I still believe through the astrology that they will lose, the GOP will lose. But if they do nothing, my perspective, it's pretty much a guaranteed catastrophe that they go into 2026 badly, badly hampered, because you're handing the opposition a messaging platform that is so powerful it'll be almost impossible to overcome.